Presently, we're in the middle of a series entitled Biblical Wisdom. And the whole premise of this series is that the Pareto principle applies to biblical principles. Now, before I go on, let me ask, is everyone familiar with the Pareto principle, also known as the 20-80 rule? If you're not familiar with it, let me give you a brief explanation of it. First of all, the principle is named after an Italian sociologist and economist, Vilfredo Pareto. One day he was doing research and he discovered that 20% of the population owned approximately 80% of the land in Italy. And this interested him because this ratio of 20-80 seemed to be a natural phenomena that applies across a wide spectrum. As an example, it applies to task. 20% of the tasks on your to-do list will produce 80% of your results. It applies to time. 20% of your time will produce 80% of your overall productivity. It applies to businesses. 20% of a store's products will bring in 80% of their profit. It applies to reading. 20% of a book contains 80% of the most important content. That's why you can get Cliff Notes. It applies to donations. 20% of the donors will give 80% of the money. And I could go on and on and on. But that, my friends, is the Pareto principle, also known as the 20-80 rule. Sometimes you hear people refer to it as the 80-20 rule. It doesn't matter. You're just reversing the way you say it. All right? But the ratio is still the same. It is a natural phenomena that applies across a wide spectrum. Now, listen to this because this is very, very important. The Pareto principle even applies to biblical principles. Yeah. Certain principles produce greater results than others. Let me say that again because it's very, very important. And that's the whole premise of this series. Certain principles produce greater results than others. And guess what? Those principles that produce greater results fall into the 20% category. The category that produces greater results. How much greater, you ask? About 80% greater. Yeah, it's the Pareto principle. Now, if I know what those principles are, I can focus on them and change my life dramatically. In other words, if I know which marriage principles produce the greatest results, I can focus on those principles and I'll see tremendous results in my marriage. Remember, 20% of the marriage principles in the Bible will produce greater results, about 80% greater. In fact, let me go a little bit further. You need to understand what I'm saying. Let's suppose that you're going to get married, and this is your wedding day right here. And what you really want in life is you want a great marriage. So you're going to start off right, and you're going to actually go to premarital counseling with Bobby Musgrove. And the reason you're going to do that is because they told you when you went down there to buy your marriage license, it's cheaper if you get premarital counseling. And they don't want to save money. Now, you don't really expect to learn anything. You're just hoping that you can meet the guy, he'll say that he counseled you, and you can go get the license, right? But Bobby's not that way. So what Bobby does, and this is the wedding date, is he starts giving you all of these biblical principles. And he says, if you'll follow these biblical principles, you can have a great marriage. And when he goes through these principles, you find out there's about 30 principles. And you think, oh my gosh, I've got to do these 30 principles. I've got to actually carry them out to have a great marriage. And then you come to Pastor Allen. And Pastor Allen says, I'm going to give you a cheat sheet. About 20% of these principles will take you 80% of the way to a great marriage. And so he gives you the 30 principles. I come in and I give you 20%. What's 20% of 30? Anyone know? About 6. Yeah, 10% is 3. 20% is 6. 30% is 9. 40% is 12. 50%, which is half, is 15. But I tell you, you just need to know 6 principles. And if you know these 6 principles and you apply them, you can get up to 80% of the way to a great marriage. In fact, you start off with these 6 principles, you'll have a good marriage from the get-go. Now, it doesn't mean it'll give you a great marriage. Why? Because there's 24 other principles that will take you the rest of the way. But I want to get you started because here's what I know. Most of you won't learn the 6. And so you'll start focusing on what your cousin Bubba told you, or your mama told you, or your daddy told you. And they might be biblical principles, but if they're not the 6 principles, guess what? You got these 24 principles, and they take you 20% of the way to a great marriage. But you're not doing the 6 most important. So guess what? You get divorced. Yeah. And you don't understand it because your principles that you were applying to your marriage came right from the Bible. The problem is they weren't the most important principles. Do you get what I'm saying? This is why the pareto principle is so important. Now, let's go further. If I know which financial principles produce the greatest results, I can focus on those principles and I'll see tremendous results in my finances. Remember, 20% of the financial principles will produce greater results. How much greater? About 80%. Now, let's just change this. And let's say we're starting off our wedding date here, but we want to have good finances. So we want to be stable and secure, and we want to make sure that our finances are in order. We'll put in secure. And this is a great home. This is stability. We want to make sure that our financial home is in order. So guess what? There's about 30 financial principles in the Bible. But you really need to know only about 6. And guess what? If you know those 6, you'll be in good shape for your finances just by doing those. Good shape financially. Make sure I'm doing this right. You'll be in good shape financially just by doing it. But if you don't concentrate on these 6 and you concentrate on the other 24, only about 20% of your finances is going to be in order. People come to me all the time and they want to say this, we just can't make it financially. And so they start telling me, I don't understand it. I'm doing all these biblical things. I'm tithing. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm working hard like the Bible says. And so they start giving me these financial principles. But the thing that I realize is they're concentrating on the 24 that only takes them 20% of the way to get to the point where they're in good shape financially, because where you really want to be is stable and secure. Everyone with me? So I give you a cheat sheet. I say, let's concentrate on the 6 most important, because if you concentrate on those, let me tell you, you'll get 80% of the way. And that's the way life works. I'm telling you, the pareto principle is great because it also applies to biblical principles. And people, this works in every area of your life, every area. Now, what I'm sharing with you is scriptural. Turn with me, if you would, to Matthew chapter 23, verse 23, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Here's what Jesus said. What sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees, hypocrites? If you guys think I'm snarky, this is Jesus. Yeah. How would you feel if you were a Pharisee sitting out there and he says to you, what sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law? That's me. And you Pharisees, hypocrites. For you are careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens, but you ignore the more important parts of the law. Wait a minute. These are from the Bible. These are parts of the law. These are the commandments, but there's more important parts. Justice, mercy, and faith. Now listen to this. You should tithe, yes, but do not neglect the more important things. Now, what is Jesus telling us in this passage of Scripture? Jesus is telling us that certain parts of the law, about 20%, are more important than others. Why? Because they'll have a greater impact in your life. How much greater? About 80%, which is what the pareto principle teaches. So what I'm telling you is biblically correct. Certain biblical principles, about 20%, are more important than others. Why are they more important? Because they have a greater impact. How much greater? About 80%. Now, these numbers are hard to quantify. So when I say 20%, I mean approximately 20%. That's why I told you half a dozen or so in the earlier sermons, because it's hard to actually quantify. So it's more of an approximation or guesstimation, and the same thing for the 80%. I haven't sat down and worked out the precise number. No one has that I know of, and I don't even know if it's possible. How many of you have ever gone to the doctor and the doctor comes in and says, so you're having some pain in your stomach. So let me ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your pain level? I hate that question. I don't know. 6? You know what? I have a very high pain tolerance. You know, when I had my knees replaced, they sent me home with all these painkillers. I think I used 1. When I had this done, they kept coming and saying, boy, you need something for your pain. Not really. Send me home with them. 2. Yeah. I just have a high pain tolerance. And so as a result of that, it's something hard for me to quantify. I can't hardly do that. Anyone else the same way? Now, don't break into my house, because those have already been, because I don't use them. Don't keep those things. I don't have those in my home. Feel like I better say that. Before I get home and my house is broken, there's none there anymore. All right? But what I'm trying to say is it's really kind of hard to quantify, because you'd have to go through the Bible and specifically find all of the principles that deal with marriage, and then you're looking for the most important, and then that's subjective, and then you're trying to quantify those numbers. Does that make sense? But we do know that a small number of biblical principles produce much greater results than others, and it's pretty close to the 20-80 rule. Now, listen to me, because this is very, very important. According to the Pareto principle, 20% of the marriage principles in the Bible will produce greater results than the others, about 80% greater. Why? Because they're more important. But the only reason they're more important is because they will have a greater impact on your marriage. So yes, you definitely want to learn those principles and practice them in your marriage. Because I promise you, even if you never have a great marriage, and I wish I'd left that up here, if you get to 80%, you will still have a good marriage. Just by knowing 6 biblical marriage principles and applying them. But Jesus also said, and this is why I say, I want you to understand something. He also said in Matthew 20:23, don't neglect the other ones. They might not be as important, but they are important. So my goal for this series is to give you what I consider to be the most important principles in 3 different areas in life. In essence, I'm applying the Pareto principle to biblical principles, and I'm giving to you what I consider to be the most important principles, because they will make the greatest impact in the area of life they relate to. Does that make sense? Everyone with me? Good. And the 3 areas that I'm focusing on are, number 1, finances, number 2, marriage, and number 3, parenting. If I get tired of this series, we might not finish parenting. I thought I could do this much quicker than I'm doing it, but anyways, those are the 3 areas I would like to give you the most important biblical principles, because in those 3 areas, your finances, your marriage, your children. Let me tell you, you get those three areas right, you're going to have a great life, even if you die early. Yeah. Now, I've already covered finances, so now I'm giving you the most important marriage principles. The first one I gave you is what I call the purpose of marriage principle. We covered that 2 weeks ago, so I'm not going to go into it. Instead, I'm going to move on to the second most important marriage principle. The second most important marriage principle, in my opinion, is the praxis principle. Now, if you're not familiar with the praxis principle, don't worry about it, because I'll explain what it is and how it works in just a little bit. But first, I need to explain the concept of love from a biblical perspective. You see, if you don't understand the concept of love from a biblical perspective, then you will not understand the praxis principle, because those two go hand in hand. Agape love and the praxis principle go hand in hand. So let's talk about love, and let's see what the Bible has to say about it. Turn with me, if you would, to the book of John, chapter 13, verse 34, and I want you to notice what it says. So now I'm giving you a new commandment. Underline the word new. That's very important. I'm giving you a new commandment. Here it is. Love each other. That's not new. Well, let me clarify. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Now, why is this a new commandment? Well, the old commandment said you're to love your neighbor as yourself. Yeah. So you are the standard by which you choose to love each other. And that also gives us a way out of doing what we're supposed to do. If I move and I don't expect anyone else to help me move, then when you move to a new home and you want me to help you, I go, yeah, I'm busy, but inside I'm thinking, I'm not going to help you. No one help me. I don't expect anyone to help me. Why should you expect me to help you? You see, I'm the standard by which I love others. I'm not breaking that. I'm loving you as myself. So what I don't expect from others, I don't do for others. Does everyone see that? That's the old commandment. Jesus understood, you know what? These sinful creatures, they make all these excuses why they can't fulfill this simple concept of love others. So he says, I'm going to give you a new commandment. I want you to love others the way I love you. And I go, crap. Because when Jesus becomes the standard, he does things for others that he does not expect them to do for him. I mean, the God of the universe came to this earth in the form of a man. That's what the incarnation is all about. And he didn't come to be served, though he had every right to be served. He came to serve, not be served. Wow. So, Jesus says we're supposed to love each other as he loved us. But how is that possible? Can you force yourself to love others? Well, believe it or not, the answer is yes. And if you don't think that it's possible, then you don't know what love is. At least not the type of love that Jesus is talking about. You see, when Jesus commanded us to love each other, he used the word agape. And that's a specific type of love that most people don't understand. You see, most of us think of love as a feeling. You know, you ask your kids, do you love me? Yeah, I love you. How much? I don't know. Same answer you get when what you learn in school. I don't know. Nothing. Yeah. But you see, most of us think of love as a feeling. But people, agape love is not a feeling. In fact, agape love has nothing to do with feelings. Agape love is a conscious decision to behave in a certain way. In fact, let me explain the 4 different types of love so you can understand what agape love is and how it's different than all the other types of love. You see, we use the word love in English for everything. I love chocolate. I love strawberry shortcake. I love fast cars. I no longer love roller coasters. They make me sick. Not when I was a kid. I loved roller coasters. I love my children. Well, how in the world can I use love for Cheetos and strawberry shortcake and then use the same word for children? We use the same word. Greeks didn't do that. The Greeks had 4 different words for love. In fact, in Christ's day, they used these 4 different words. You'll find them in the Bible, but a lot of extracurricular books too are outside of the Bible. Here are the 4 different Greek words: eros, stergo, phileo, and agape. And each of these words referred to a specific type of love. Eros referred to a sensual, passionate love. This type of love was used to describe chemistry between 2 people. You know what I'm talking about, where you're physically attracted to each other and there's sexual tension. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's eros. In fact, our English word erotic comes from this Greek word. Stergo love referred to an affection for something. In fact, this word had 3 different nuances, or in other words, 3 different shades of meaning. Number 1, it can refer to the affection we have for things, such as chocolate, fast cars, roller coasters. If I tell you I love Cheetos, I do not want to marry Cheetos. I do not want to have a sexual relationship with Cheetos. I can't even imagine how you could. But in today's culture, I'm sure someone identifies as a Cheeto and wants to marry a Cheetos. Yeah. But I want you to understand, I'm not that way. When I say I love Cheetos, I just mean I like Cheetos. Everyone with me? Secondly, it can refer to the affection we have for things we've grown accustomed to and we're comfortable with, such as slippers, a chair, a bathrobe. I love my bathrobe. I'm sure it's time for a new one. Lisa ordered me a new one. I didn't like it. It didn't feel right. Didn't feel like my old one. The sleeves were too tight. It just didn't fit right. I want my old black terry cloth robe. Yeah. And I want to sit in this chair. I have a wide bottom. It's a wide bottom chair. I love that chair. Everyone understand what I'm talking about? And it can also refer to, number 3, a fond affection for people or animals. But the root meaning of stergo love is affection or attachment to someone or something. So, in essence, it means you really, really like something. So, if you say, I love Cheetos, you mean you really, really like Cheetos. Your favorite foods, you probably say, I love cheesecake. I love lobster. What you mean is you really, really like it. That's stergo. All right? The third type of love is phileo, which is a more intimate type of love. It's the type of love you have for a few close, intimate friends. It's what scholars call a best friend kind of love. In fact, you don't use this word in reference to inanimate objects. Everyone with me on that? You can't love your car with phileo love. That's stergo. It only refers to live things. It's only used in reference to people. And in rare instances, animals. Because there are some people who love their pets just like children. And boy, did I step in it several weeks ago. Let me say this. If you want to believe your pet's going to heaven, that's fine with me. Don't write me any more emails. Okay, that's fine. I won't get into technically, I won't go into scripture, but you believe that. But now I get it. Some of you love your pets like children, and nothing is wrong with that. So, this type of love, phileo, can also apply to pets, but it's very rare to do that. All right, I want to say that. In the Bible, it's very, very rare, and outside of the Bible, in ancient times, the time of Jesus, it was very, very rare to do that. But it did happen. But however, here's the thing I want you to remember. The most important thing you need to know about phileo love is it's a feeling. All right? Phileo is a feeling. Eros is a feeling. Oh, yeah. It tingles. It makes you Eros. Phileo makes you want to just hug them. You just love them. Yeah, those are feelings. But then you have agape love. Now, let me give you the technical definition, and then I'll explain it in layman's terms. Technically, agape love is defined as a sober, rational love which consciously chooses to place a high value upon a person, producing an appropriate corresponding action. But here's what I want you to notice. Agape love is not a feeling. It is a conscious decision to love in word and deed. It's not based on emotion. It's not based on feelings. It is a choice, a conscious choice. It is a decision, a conscious decision. So let me explain what agape love is in layman's terms. Agape love is a choice. It's a decision to behave in a certain way. Did you hear that? Write that down. All right? It's too important to forget. So I'm going to say it again, and I want you to write it down. Agape love is a choice. It's a decision to behave in a certain way, and it has nothing to do with feelings. That's why Jesus could command us to love our enemies and expect us to do it. Some of you come to my office and you say, Pastor Allen, God said we're supposed to love our enemies. I hate that person. How in the world am I supposed to love them? Whoa. You don't understand the concept of love from a biblical perspective. When he said you're to love your enemies, he used the word agape. It is not a feeling. It is not emotions. It is a conscious decision and choice to behave in a certain way. You see, the type of love that Jesus wants us to have for our enemies has nothing to do with feelings. Instead, it's a choice to behave in a certain way towards them. In fact, let me show you something interesting. Okay, do I have time to do this? Let's go through this fast. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 is a great description of what agape love is. So go ahead and turn there if you don't mind, and let's read verses 4 through 8. Love is patient, love is kind, it's not jealous, love does not brag, it is not arrogant, does not act unbecomingly, it does not seek itself, does not provoke, does not take into account a wrong suffered, does not rejoice in the righteous, but rejoices with the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things, love never fails. Now I want you to notice, 1 Corinthians chapter 13 isn't describing how agape love feels. It doesn't say, agape love warms the heart. It makes your heart flutter and your toes tingle. It gives you butterflies in your stomach. It makes you excited to see the person you love. And it makes you sad to say goodbye. No, 1 Corinthians chapter 13 does not say that. Why? Because agape love is not a feeling. It's a choice to behave in a certain way. In fact, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, describing agape love, has nothing to do with feelings. It only deals with your behavior. In other words, it's describing the way agape love behaves. Now, let me read those verses in everyday language. Agape love doesn't make me feel patient. I'm running out of patience. It makes me act patiently. Agape love doesn't make me feel kind. It makes me act kind. It makes me act kind even when I don't feel like it. Agape love doesn't act jealousy. It doesn't brag. It doesn't act arrogantly. Agape love doesn't act rude. It doesn't step on others. It doesn't get mad. It doesn't keep score. Agape love protects others. It chooses to trust others. It perseveres. It never gives up on a person. So let me say that again. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 is not describing the way agape love makes you feel. It's describing the way that it makes you behave. Why? Because agape love has nothing to do with feelings. It has to do with the way you behave. It is a choice. It is a decision to behave towards others the way that God behaves towards us, and the way 1 Corinthians 13 is describing. Now, people, let's apply this to everyday life. Because agape love is a choice, it's a decision to behave in a certain way, and it has nothing to do with feelings. I don't have to like someone in order to love them. Did you catch that? According to the definition of agape love, I don't have to like someone in order to love them. I don't have to like you in order to behave in a loving way towards you. In fact, let's be honest, I don't like a lot of you. Yeah. I don't like the way you treat your spouse. I don't like the way you treat your children. I don't like how stingy you are with your money. I don't like the fact that you're selfish with your time and you won't volunteer to do a thing around the church. So to be totally honest, I don't like some of you. However, I can still love you with an agape love. I can still fulfill Jesus' command to love others the way he loved us. And others includes you. It includes those I like and those I don't like. Now, how is that possible? How is it possible to love someone you don't even like? It's possible because agape love is not a feeling. Agape love is a choice. It's a decision to behave in a certain way. Is everyone with me so far? Now you know the 4 words for love, and you know what agape love is. That's very important because we're not through yet. Now I want to give you the praxis principle, because I told you agape love and the praxis principle go hand in hand. Yeah. So, first, does everyone know what the word praxis means? If you don't, let me expand your vocabulary. Praxis is defined as a habitual way of behaving. Now remember what a principle is. A principle is the fundamental truth that explains how something works. Marriage principles are fundamental truths that explain how marriage works. Financial principles are fundamental truths that explain how finances work. So the praxis principle is a fundamental truth that explains how our habitual behavior affects us. Write that down because that's important. What is the praxis principle? It is a fundamental truth that explains how our habitual behavior affects us. So let me give it to you. You ready? Here's the praxis principle. The way you habitually behave towards someone will eventually affect the way you feel about them. I'm going to give you time to write that down, so I'll say it again. The way you habitually behave towards someone will eventually affect the way you feel about them. That is the praxis principle. Because when it comes to relationships, and especially marriage, this is probably the second most important principle of all the principles that deal with marriage. It's number 2. Everyone got it? Did you write it down? Now let me give it to you in layman's terms. The way I treat my spouse will affect the way I feel about my spouse. Yeah. If I treat my spouse like she's my personal property, I will feel like she's my personal property. If I treat my spouse like garbage, I will feel like she's garbage. If I treat my spouse like they're worthless, I will feel like she's worthless. On the other hand, if I treat Lisa like she's my most valuable possession, I will feel like she's my most valuable possession. This is why the praxis principle, this is why God commands you to love others with an agape love, and especially your spouse. You see, God understands that the way you treat others will eventually affect the way you feel about them. So he says, forget about your feelings and let's concentrate on your behavior. Because God knows that eventually you'll begin to feel the way you behave towards others. In other words, your behavior will affect your feelings. That is the praxis principle. In fact, do you remember when I said I don't like some of you, but I can still love you? Here's what's interesting. When I choose to love you, it eventually causes me to like you. Now, let me be honest with you. I like every one of you. I do. I run around with people that every once in a while someone will say, Pastor, let me ask you a question. I notice you run around with so-and-so. Do you like them? Well, yeah, I like them. Why? I'm going to be honest. They're a rear. And they start telling me things. Oh, number one, but here's what's up. They're just quirky. They're just different. You know what I found? I treat them the way God wants me to treat them. It affects the way I get along with people that other people go, how can you stand to be around them? They're just different. My attitude inside changed because of the way I behave towards them. Before I know it, I kind of like them. They're funny. Yeah. A lot of people don't like me. I'm choleric. I can be snarky. How many of you know that? It's okay. Okay. When you first came, you didn't like me. In fact, you weren't even sure you were going to come back. But man, that teaching was good. I'll come back. You heard a little more, then you saw me. Hi, Pastor Allen. And you started treating me like you liked me. And before you know it, you go, that's just Pastor Allen. He doesn't mean it. That's just him. He has a soft heart. Julie Jones told me when she came to work, she said, you are so different. I was kind of intimidated and fearful to come work for you. And said, I found out you're just this soft, cuddly bear. That's me. I cry all the time. But my motivational gifts are teaching and prophecy. Teaching was 99%. And the only reason 99%, not 100%, is because I thought, maybe I'm thinking a little bit too much of myself. I better put that down. Or if I'd answered honestly, been 100%. The second motivational gift is prophecy. Now, we're not talking about the manifestation gifts. We're talking about the motivational gifts. And motivational gifts prophecy means that you're black and white. You don't see much gray. You ever notice when I'm teaching, there's not much gray? Now, when I get to Romans and it talks about Christian liberty, I get plenty of gray there because that's what the Bible does. But if the Bible's black and white, guess what? I'm black and white. That's that motivational gets to prophecy. Yeah. And so when you come hear me, you're like, my gosh. In fact, my nephew, Ryan, he married Macy. And so when they were dating, he said, why don't you come to church with me? And she said, well, where do you go? He goes, of course, she goes, I've heard about that pastor. So every time I see her, I go, I'm that pastor. No, yeah. Yeah. But you like me now. You know why? You behave towards me the way God said to do that. And everyone's like, well, that's just Pastor Allen. Just got to overlook it. Yeah. Let me go a little bit further. My dad was a caregiver. Took care of my grandpa. When it was time to put him in the nursing home, my dad just couldn't do it. So he built a place and onto the home and moved him in there and took care of my grandpa. When my grandpa died, I'll tell you how stressful it was. My dad slept for like 6 weeks straight. So run down. My Uncle Dean came up. My Uncle Dean, his wife had died. They never had any children. And he came up to stay with my dad for a while, and he had a major stroke and became a vegetable. Of course, my dad was still working at the time, and so he put him in a nursing home. He just couldn't do it. So he brought him home, built onto his house, put him in there, built everything in a way that he could bathe him, take care of him. And my dad did. For 7 years, he was a vegetable. My dad fed him. My dad shaved him. My dad bathed him. My dad put diapers on him and wiped him as a baby. And no one helped my dad. I go up sometimes, sit with Uncle Dean. So my dad could just and when I say get away, just for an hour or two. But for 7 years he did that. But when Uncle Dean died, I went to the funeral, and my dad cried more at Uncle Dean's funeral than he did his own mom's. So a couple of days later, I was up there talking with Dad, and I said, Dad, I saw that you cried more at Uncle Dean's funeral than you did Grandma's. I said, it had to have been a relief that he died. I'll never forget what my dad said. My dad said, Alan, when you're a caregiver and you take care of someone and you feed them and you bathe them and you wipe them, he said, they become like your baby. He said, when Dean died, it was like losing one of my children. That's the praxis principle. You let that stray dog come to your back door and it's ugly and it's mangy and good Lord, get rid of that dog before the kids see it. But you can see its ribs, and so you go, well, okay, you put a little food out there and a little water. He eats it, drinks it, and he kind of hangs around the back porch, and you put up with it. And for long, you reach down there and you pet it because it's coming up to you. You're feeding it, now you're petting it, and one day you're at Walmart, you bring home a flea and tick collar. You put that collar on that dog, and before you know it, it's your dog. You sit down, it sits down by you, you're down there, and yeah, good boy. You find out he's pretty smart, you start doing things. And then it gets run over by a car, and you can't believe your dog is gone. What happened? The praxis principle. It works in all relationships. But let me tell you, it really works in marriage. So let me give you 2 examples of how it works in marriage. I've told this story before, but it's a true story. A man was going to a counselor for marriage, and he had made up his mind, I'm going to get a divorce. So he set up his own private session. Went to see him. He said, I've decided I'm going to divorce my wife, and I have to be honest with you, I hate her. He said, well, why in the world did you set up a private session? He said, well, I want you to tell me, because I want to hurt her, and I want to hurt her good. What do I need to do before I divorce her to really hurt her? He said, you really want to hurt her? He said, I really want to hurt her. She's made my life miserable. She's going to get half of all my stuff. I want to get her, and I want to get her good. So I'll tell you what you do. You start treating her like a princess. You tell her you love her. You do things for her. You bring her coffee. You open the door for her. You tell her she's beautiful. You do that for 2 months. And about the time she's in love with you, that's when you serve her the divorce papers. The guy goes, doesn't come back. Counselor calls his office, leaves a message. I want to see you if you don't mind. Free session, just come on in. Sets up a time with him. The guy comes in. He says, by the way, how'd the divorce go? He said, divorce? Are you crazy? That woman is wonderful. She's the love of my life. I can't believe I even thought about divorcing her. What happened? The way he habitually behaved towards her affected the way that he felt about her. I can watch the way you treat your spouse, and I can tell what kind of marriage you have. I saw a person that had a moral failure, and it didn't surprise me when it happened, because as I watched them with their wife, I recognized and realized that he thought he could have done better. And I knew that's just a matter of time. When you think you can do better, you will go out and find what you think is better. I'm going to give you one more example and we'll stop it. of the praxis principle. True story. This happened before I knew the praxis principle, so I didn't have the answer for it. A lady came to me. Her husband had an affair. And when she found out about the affair, she kicked him out. She went down to the lawyer. She wanted to file for divorce. The guy recognized, man, I made a mistake. And man, he begged her and he did everything he could and he worked for months, and it went about a year. Finally, she decided that, okay, I'll go out to coffee with you. So they go out to coffee. Still hadn't filed for divorce. Or she'd filed, but it had never gone through. Then they went out on a date, and then it went for months. And it was probably 2 years before she allowed him to move back in. And he moved back in. And she came to me, it was like 20 years ago. And she said, I have the best marriage, a better marriage than I ever thought I would. Now, Pastor, I'm going to say something funny. But if it hadn't been for that affair, I don't think we would have. We had a horrible marriage. But when he had that affair, something inside of him changed. When he tried to get me back and said, we have a great marriage. And I would never recommend that anyone do that, but I can say this, and it sounds crazy, but if it hadn't been for that affair, we'd probably be divorced by now. Instead, we have the greatest marriage ever. Back then, I didn't know what to say. Now I'd say, well, you know what happened? When he realized he lost shit, he realized what you were, he started treating you that way. When he started treating you that way, that's how he began to feel about you. So I'm telling you, when we look at marriage, take away finances now, and we're going to come in and we're going to look at marriage, I'm going to tell you, you take that first principle I taught you, the purpose of marriage. The more Christ-like you are in your marriage, the better your marriage. That's it in a nutshell. The more you become like Christ, the better spouse you'll be. You do that first. Then you come in and you do, so we'll do purpose here, purpose of marriage principle. And then we'll do praxis principle. Man, you do those two, look how far you are. And then we come in here, we'll start looking at these other principles. Before you know it, you're going to be up here and you're going to have a good marriage just by doing 6 simple principles from the Bible. Let's stand. I wish I'd known this when I was 20 years old. How many of you feel like that? But now you can teach your children and your grandchildren. They can have great marriages. That's why Solomon says, get knowledge, get understanding, and with it all, get wisdom. You get these 3 things, and you'll have a great life. Now, if you're here this morning, let me say this. The very first one is the purpose of marriage principle. And basically, if you remember this, the more Christ-like you are, the better marriage you'll have. Well, here's the thing. If you don't have Christ, you can have a good marriage, you can have great finance. You can apply the principles I'm teaching, and you can have a great life here on this earth, but you'll be lost for all eternity. You want to have a great life on this earth, and you want to go to heaven? You need Jesus Christ.